Good afternoon, good morning to you, dear speakers, sharing this panel, this space with me. Good afternoon, good morning to all of you, dear participants out there and interested guests in this topic of the session entitled Programming Art for Wellbeing in Cultural Institutions. I welcome you on behalf of the conference organizers, first of all, Cluj Cultural Centre and all project partners to this panel discussion. My name is Kathrin Deventer. I'm the head of the European Festivals Association, and as such in touch with hundreds of festivals and festival makers that deal as programmers, as event organizers. I can see more and more with the topic of health and well-being, and definitely, and last but not least, due to the last 18 months that we all shared and experienced with each other. I think to present best practices, discuss and share experiences amongst practitioners and engage with experts and decision makers about support structures needed to scale up cultural well-being projects is so important. And we know that there is a lot of work to be done. Geeraerts and the whole team in Cluj and project partners probably can witness that from the experience of what they have done in the past couple of months and years. But without any doubt, and we probably agree all together, is that well-being is a topic for the arts sector because it's a topic for the community and it's a topic for society. There is a lot of research and research in particular about the correlations between arts and well-being. And I don't need to sum anything up of that because the whole morning session led by Pierluigi Sacco this morning was about that research insights and the level of academia, on the level of politics, and also on the level of foundations. What we do here is to speak about the responsibility we have as event organizers, as artists, when we organize our structures, our programs, accessibility to our venues, and also about the political agenda that we need to follow in the realm of our civil society engagements. So our session examines how artists and cultural institutions embrace the topic of art and well-being, from artistic research on empathy, meaning or living with diseases, to dedicated programs for special audiences. This is how it's described in the conference program. And so we will use these 90 minutes to present best practices and explore how cultural institutions can develop new programs and provide new forms of care. Luckily, I do not have to do this. I'm happy to have four fantastic panelists and speakers here with us, with me in this space. It's Geeraerts from the BOZAR, the Center for Fine Arts in Brussels. Welcome, Anne. It's Jure Kirbis from UGM Maribor Art Gallery. Hi, dear. Greetings to Slovenia. We have Jack Spencer, if you are there, who knows? We have Jack Spencer here from Urban Scales Interventions. Good to see you back, Jack. And we have Angeliki Lampiri from Eleusis 2023 European Capital of Culture. I'm sorry. Welcome. How we will organize our 90 minutes? We do it as follows. Each of our guests will have a presentation. We keep it short, 7 to 8 minutes. We will have, after this presentation, after these four presentations, the chance to pick up questions and answers from the Q&A box that all participants that are following this webinar can use. So please add your questions, your comments that we try to pick up in the conversation after the four presentations into the box. You can wait until the end of the session, otherwise I lose your comments, but you can of course already start putting Q's and A's and comments and ideas and so forth during the presentation of panelists, and we do our best not to lose your comments for the Q&A and the panelists' discussion after the four presentations. Maybe to mention as well, everyone or nobody should be excluded from these little cameras. If you really feel the urge to be what we call upgraded and join the conversation with your microphone and your face, please raise your hand. Then you will be allowed to open your camera and you will be added to the speakers panel for a very urgent idea, suggestion, anything you would like to share. I think this is it. Let's start. dear panelists. Of course, you are free. I don't need to explain this to you, to share any kind of PowerPoint presentations, your screen with whatever you find relevant for your topic. You should have the permission, but try to keep to the 8 minutes, and apologies in advance if I start to interrupt you after these 8 minutes. It's just as a matter of keeping our timing as best as we can in the 90 minutes that we have at our disposal. Let's start with, not because I am in Brussels, but let's start with Brussels and with quite a big institution, Anne, that you are working for, which is the BOZAR. It's a huge established cultural center for music, for visual arts, for all kinds of arts. I can imagine that such a topic is important for such a huge institution, but at the same time, it's difficult to enter that space of arts and well-being where something is rolling for hundreds of years for such a long time in such an institutional way. What's your approach of the BOZAR on the topic of art and well-being? Anne?
Yes, thank you very much, Kathrin. I will try and share a small, hopefully short presentation with you. Yes. Now I have to try whether I can get it to function. Yes. So I hope you all see the slideshow now. Great. Okay, so my name is Anne. I am working as an associate curator in the Center for Fine Arts, and I will very shortly try to tell you something about how we approached this project and how we try to program within the frame of this project. As Kathrin already said, here you see the Center for Fine Arts. We are located in the heart of Brussels, and we are one of the largest cultural institutions in Belgium. We have existed since 1928, and we are housed in wonderful Art Deco building designed by Victor Horta. So we have more than 4,000 square meters of exhibition space, and we have one of the largest concert halls, which you see here on the right. So obviously for a house this big, it's very difficult to put health and well-being as a priority on your agenda. And there are so many priorities, but also I think it's very crucial to put it on the agenda. So we have been working on this thematics and on these topics for quite some time. But this project really allowed us to go more in depth and to check actually more the relationship and make more of a reflection between culture, the relationship between culture and well-being. And also to further develop our expertise, not only in programming, but also in partnerships. And for us, we adopted some really important starting points. We wanted to investigate further the interaction between arts and well-being and arts and health, but really focus on health with the definition of the World Health Organization. So not just health as the absence of disease, but really health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And also for us,
yes. I'm sorry to interrupt. If you find this little button that you can increase your screen to full screen, participants can more easily follow your presentation as well. Now we still see your environment of your screen.
Oh, really?
If you go down, you can put it on full screen on these little icons on the very bottom of your page.
So I'm within, wait, let me just see. I'm sorry, I'm not.
If it doesn't work, don't worry, you go ahead, and we try to open our eyes even more. It is not a reason to stop. But
you mean within the PowerPoint or within this frame?
Yes, within the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is not on full screen.
I'm actually within the Zoom version of PowerPoint now.
Voila, I think it looks, to me now it looks good. Dear participants, if you can confirm our support team.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, please, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So what was very important for us as well was that we work a lot around teams each seasonal period. But for us, we didn't want to work around well-being merely as a team for these last 2 years. We wanted to be more of a long-term engagement and develop it more within the future. And what we also realized very quickly is that you cannot just put well-being on the top of your programming without adopting a more holistic vision to it. Because it's very weird to work about well-being when you have a very high rate of burnout within your own staff, or if people in wheelchairs can't even access your building. So we really wanted to try and work on it, and not only within the programming, but also within the partner choices and within the larger philosophy about the staff and the building, etc. So here you see actually the team we have been working around in 20 and 21. And this was the question we asked our public that we printed on a mouth mask here on the right. Can art heal us? With a little logo inspired by, of course, the famous Louise Bourgeois. For us, we were struggling a bit with embedding this well-being and health within our programming and our audience development, as there are so many different approaches. And of course, everybody very quickly starts talking about art therapy and yoga, etc. But we realized that actually you have to stay very close to your identity as a cultural institution. We are not a hospital. We do not have expertise to work with specific target groups. We are a house for the arts. And we believe not that art can cure people, not that you come in with a severe burnout and you walk in after a concert and that you are cured, but we firmly believe in the beneficiary impact of the arts and of people engaging in the arts, whether it be passive or actively, whether it be individually or in a group, that they can actually be transformed and have a very positive impact of this. And of course, because we believe this, I think that this means that we as an institution also have a responsibility to engage with as much communities and as large as an audience as possible, but also that we seek out new ways of working with artists and connecting with communities and communicating with different audience in order to share the impact of art as widely as possible. So for this program that we did for the last 2 years, we worked with psychiatrist Dirk de Wachter, who you see here in our exhibition Dans C Britts. He is a very famous psychiatrist in Belgium. He wrote the best-selling book Borderline Times, because of course we wanted, as I said, we wanted to approach health from a larger point of view. And with all the changes that we are facing today, it's not merely about not being sick, but we are facing a lot of social, environmental, political, economical changes. And this brings about a lot of new diseases. Well, I call it diseases, but we see so many people suffering from anxiety, from chronic fatigue, from stress, from burnout, that we almost consider this to be a permanent state of being. And we believe that arts can help and develop our own well-being. This was one of the topics raised by psychiatrist Dirk de Wachter in one of his talks on art and togetherness and art in pandemic times. I think what was most important in his narrative for me was his metaphor that he said art is often considered as a cherry on the cake, as a little ornament, but actually it's the base of the cake. It's a structure holding everything together, and it's really essential to humankind. So this is actually, I think, we had a twofold focus for our program. And that was actually, well, on one hand, further question the impact of the arts on our well-being. And then on the other hand, we really wanted to focus on aspect of health within our programmation, and specifically on physical and mental disabilities. Especially, I think, for us to move beyond the stereotypes and to move beyond stigmatization. And this was the central narrative of our main exhibition, Dans C Britts, which you see here on the left, is the affiche. For Dans C Britts, we worked together with the Dr. Ghislain Museum in Ghent, which you see here on the right, which is housed in one of the oldest mental asylums in Belgium, and is now, since the 80s, a museum dedicated to the history of psychiatry. And we made this exhibition, Dans C Britts, which was quite an atypical exhibition. Why? Because It put together, I would say, mainstream arts with outsider art and art brut with archive materials, with films. And this was all on the topic of movement and dance, but moving and dancing from an artistic point of view, or starting from a physical or a mental disability, and how these two can influence each other. And I think for us, what was really important, here you see an image, for example, of not that very well-known work of an outsider artist coming from the museum from Villeneuve-d'Ascq in northern France. And in the background, you see a work by Patrick van Kakenberg, a Belgian mainstream artist. We did not label or tag any arts work in the exhibition. This is outsider art, this is art brut, and this is mainstream art. I think through the curatorial approach, actually, that we showed how closely involved these works are and that it's not necessary. Actually, I think the exhibition questioned itself the use of these labels, like art brut, like outsider art. And I think that was really important. Some more images here. I don't know how much time I have.
One little minute,
Then I will not go into the further. I just want to say maybe quickly that we installed in the end of the exhibition a dancing platform in the middle of the hall. So visitors, random visitors, could stand up and do their own sort of choreography in the center of the exhibition. And we also wanted to use this as like of a well-being space to do several events. Now, of course, the exhibition was normally foreseen in May, was cancelled, was then moved to September, had to close during second lockdown. So we didn't get to do as much as the events as we wanted to, but we did invite, for example, here, famous choreographer Alain Platel to talk about his work with children with disabilities, etc. So maybe in conclusion, I will directly go to these last points. For us, this project was really a learning curve to, I think, define better what our core values are, but also to think about how we want to approach things in the future. So to see that we want to work on well-being in the long term, and we also want to work with partners on the long term, because we see that if you work with partners like a one shot, this doesn't really create really in-depth way to proceed. This holistic vision for us is also very important. And one of the most important things I think we have once again discovered is that when you work with specific communities or groups, you should not work for them, you should work with them. For now, for example, we are making this program with people suffering from stress-related diseases, but we have included them into developing this program. So and then I think the last 2 points are a bit of our weak points for now, is the measurability of what we are doing, how to keep track of the feedback of our visitors. This is something we have to work on and we are working on. And also on a policy level, Belgium is nowhere near, for example, where the UK is. So we are trying to work on this. We think it's our civic responsibility. And that's why we are also entering this project about art on prescription with the city of Brussels. But my colleague Juliette will talk about that in the next panel.
Great. Great, Anne. Thank you so much. I have one quick follow-up question for you with the question or the requirement to have a brief reply on that. I know this panel is about programming, Art for Wellbeing, and thanks for sharing these programming elements that the BOZAR has included in this project. But I'm also interested in this institutional level and in your own position within this institutional level as BOZAR that has many departments, programming, the physical department and so forth of that building. What is for you the next concrete step that structurally within the BOZAR such a topic is not just a topic of the exhibition or not just a topic of the talk with Alain Platel, but it really becomes part of the DNA of the BOZAR. What is the next practical step for you who has taken this topic under wings in the team? Is it team talks? Is it to create a department? Is it the transversality of that topic in all the departments? How do you approach that politically?
For us, I think on a practical level, it's really, we cannot create a department around it because we have so many departments already, but we have created like a work group around it. And these are, we always try to work transversely, so with people from different departments, put them together and have regular meetings on the topic so that actually this topic can go towards all the departments, and also to like the human resources department and to the audience engagement and communication department, because how you talk about it and how you communicate about it is also very important. So our approach, I think, is mainly to work through this work group and work around it regularly and try to embed this thematic in the different layers of our institution.
Thanks a lot. And I guess through these conversations that are ongoing, there is something like measurability and effectiveness and all that you wonder, not as weak points, but as just points to tackle when it comes to the inclusion of the topic.
Yeah, we always discover new things to do and new work, of course. But it's also the fact of measurability is something we will work on now, also like with more surveying the audience, people, for example, engaging in the cultural prescriptions. They also have to be fill out a questionnaire afterwards, but also in more engaging with your own staff and having, I don't know the word in English, but some people that are like speaking points for the staff to go and talk to, and also there have some kind of feedback from your staff. How are they feeling? What would they like the institution to do more for them? So it works on different levels, actually.
Okay, we'll follow this, Anne. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We come from an institution, even though, Anne, I don't want to degrade you to an institution, because you are also, and first of all, an individual talking in this context, to an individual artist, but also in a function of curator and involved in the UGM Maribor Art Gallery. To Jure, Kirbis in Maribor, you are a curator. Are you following me? Yes, you can already unmute yourself. Great, thanks. You are an artist.
I'm not an artist.
And I think or you are a curator in this framework, right? In the art gallery. When you listen to this huge institution and when you relate to it in your own experience as the curator of an art space in Maribor, what's your interest, your motivation when it comes to the topic of well-being, and how do you see your role in this context, Jure?
Well, it was very interesting listening to Anne, because I think a lot of things that she mentioned came at play. And I think what you were discussing now at the end, this kind of within the organization looking at mental health, where we are also experiencing very similar things as you are, that in the art community, art producers and artists themselves are often overworked and experiencing burnout. So this I will also mention later in my presentation. It's practicing what we preach. How can we talk about these things where we haven't kind of fixed it within our institutions. So I think this was very important for us as well.
And please, Jure, go ahead with the presentation of your own case, because we are going to go through the 4 presentations and you are next on my list.
Yes, I cannot share my screen, I believe. Maybe it has to be done by someone else, I think.
I'm looking at the support team that is so kindly helping us in the back offices of all these screens and sharing. Does Jure have the rights to share screen?
Okay, I think I have found it, yes.
Just press some buttons.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, you see my email?
There we see your emails. That's already a good start.
Yes.
Can be part of well or not well-being.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now?
Perfect. I think it's not yet in full screen. Yes, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So I am indeed calling from Maribor, where I work at the Maribor Art Gallery as a curator. Maribor Art Gallery is the second largest museum of modern and contemporary art in Slovenia. This is our current situation, but we are promised to be moving in the next couple of years to a new building, or expanding rather. This year, we organized the 8th edition of the Eco Triennial. It's a triennial of art and environment that has been running and been organized by our institution since 1980. So it's a very kind of pioneering event dealing with now very trendy but of course important topic of the environment in connection to arts. The triennial has been asleep for 15 years, but now we kind of reawoken it. These are some images from the triennial, which took place in an old textile factory in Maribor. Why I'm mentioning this is because art and well-being at UGM has been framed within the context of this triennial. So if art and well-being is a project that is at the intersection of art and well-being, and the Eco Triennial is within the intersection of art and environment, then what we were doing and looking at UGM was at the interrelation and interconnectedness of all of those three. So art, well-being, and the environment. And why is that? Well, for one, climate crisis is a global crisis affecting all aspects of life, including mental health and also health as such. And particularly, we were interested in young people and how they experience the environmental crisis, which can often manifest in something that we discuss within our project, ecological grief, anger, anxiety, and depression. And our foundation for both the triennial itself, but also for the art and well-being events within the triennial, was this story, a real story of a glacier in Iceland, which disappeared a couple of years ago. Disappeared in a sense that it was no longer there, and it was the first glacier to lose its status as a glacier in Iceland. Here was an event that took place in 2019, where a group of Icelanders, led by an Icelandic poet, came together to install this plaque, this kind of metal sign on the place where the glacier disappeared, and on it it said, Okul is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all of the glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. So they dealt with this eco, grief, anxiety, in a sense that they came together as a group, as a community, and that they basically voiced their frustration out loud and very clearly. And this was something that was kind of our way of getting into these things. So within art and well-being at Eco8, we commissioned 4 new artworks. You're seeing them here. Then we organized 3 very different performances. So this was a slam poetry event. Then we had a drag performance, which was all kind of eco-themed, green-themed. Then a concert as well. And then we also had 2 roundtable discussions. One was on the history of environmentally minded art in Slovenia. And the second one was organized by this group called the Young for Climate Justice, which is a Slovenian offshoot of Fridays for the Future, Fridays for Future, started by Greta Thunberg. And it was this a group of these young activists and some of them artists who discussed how the environmental crisis is impacting their mental health, and also how they are addressing it through creativity. So now I will mention some of the concerns for me and for our institution, we are a small institution, you know, this is quite a small scale project going into this, this project. One was using art as illustration of issues. So we didn't want art to lose its autonomy and just become a tool or an aid to discourse. So illustrating an issue rather than having, you know, it's doing its own thing. And in relation to that, I think there was a concern of greenwashing and well-washing. I think greenwashing is quite an established term, but then well-washing, you know, it relates to kind of masking the issue and kind of being very self-congratulatory when, you know, you're saying something like, you know, we are addressing it, so we are fixing it, and you should congratulate us. And that's not only coming from within, you know, from us organizers, but it's also something that media really likes to do. You know, they like to take some very complex issues and then they find, you know, like, oh, they're fixing it through art. So it's a kind of nice title to an article, but it's a very thankless position to be in because there are so many mental health professionals and environmental scientists who are, you know, have been dealing with these issues for decades, and then we come along and, you know, so there is this concern of doing that. And then, as mentioned before, it's also the concern of our production community. So asking the question, what is the situation in regard to these issues among artists and art producers? As I mentioned, we are overworked, experiencing chronic fatigue, burnout, and also from the environmental aspect, you know, exhibition making is a big pollutant, has a high carbon footprint, and this was also one of the concerns going in. So what was our approach? I think our approach was that we addressed these issues with gravity, but also with levity. So it was, it's not all doom and gloom, or even if it is all gloom, we cannot be down on ourselves all the time. So I think using humor, being irreverent, allowing ourselves to have fun, even when faced with the severity of it all, was very important. And I think it came across in some of our work. And then I think it was important to leave room for interpretation and individual approach, meaning both in terms of the participants, so the artists and the performers and the poets, in how they created and conceived their work. We didn't want to, you know, lead their hand, but also the audience. You know, we didn't want to be too patronizing or instructive and guiding them through it by, you know, their hand. And I think the outcomes that we have seen or we have come to was that the solution to any of these problems is cannot be based on personal responsibility, but rather on structural change. You know, it's a story as long as Marx, but it's really important with these very heavy issues to unburden ourselves of personal responsibility and also stop policing each other, you know, to say like, you are doing this and you're doing that wrong and we're doing this right. But it's important, of course, to do as much as you can, but also it's important to organize and not to do everything yourself, not everything, you know, is one person's responsibility. And also it's important to pass on knowledge to teach, so someone can take over once you are exhausted. Then the second outcome is finding support in community. We found that coming together in a crisis is very important. Spending time together, working together, creating together, it's very meaningful, and also a way of processing. And then the last thing is that art can be activism. It can address issues head on, but it also doesn't have to be. And this is similar to the first point, that it's not a personal responsibility. It's also not the responsibility of artists to fix the world, and it shouldn't be expected of them. So this was our experience addressing art and well-being and environmental anxiety in our project. And to end, if I have time, I have a minute-long video. Do I have time for it?
That is exploding your time, but please.
Okay, sorry.
Show it.
It's just some of the artwork that we commissioned and to give a context.
We have to read fast, the last slides. Thank you very much, Jure. Instead of the follow-up question, we had the chance to look at the film. So I will spare this follow-up question to you. We will take you up back in the panel discussion after the 4 presentations. I just want to underline, I wanted to ask that question in my follow-up question, what you said at the very end. It is namely the question about the arts autonomy and the artistic autonomy versus the societal links and engagements in topics such as the environment and well-being on the level of artistic creation itself. And I think it's interesting to keep this point up for our discussion at the very end. Okay, thank you very much for this experience and for sharing it with us. Let's move on to urban spaces, away from the venues, away from the concert halls, away from the art galleries, into the open. And I'm happy that we have Jack with us. You are running Urban Scales Interventions. The name basically says it all. And I can imagine, not just by the name, but also because I looked up some things on YouTube, what you are doing. You will help us indeed to lead the conversation towards public spaces, the city. In other words, that's how it is described in the program, the role of art interventions in non-cultural spaces, such as also schools and other things. Please take the floor, 10 minutes.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And thanks to yourself and to the previous speakers, and thanks for having me on. Hopefully you can all see that, okay. So yeah, and thanks for the introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about exactly that, really, creative approaches to well-being, and how we've achieved that or tried to achieve that in more open spaces and spaces that aren't traditional art spaces or cultural spaces, and how we've achieved that through intervention and then through allowing open spaces and public spaces to be programmed for intervention. Just by way of really quick kind of introduction, we're Urban Scale Interventions. We're a multidisciplinary team of researchers and designers and artists and filmmakers and strategists and urbanists and all the rest of it. And really we play in this space of people, place and purpose. So people being about understanding communities on the ground, place being understanding the history and the story of the space, whatever that might be, and then purpose, what are we trying to achieve there in terms of outcomes, improving well-being and things like that. And we do that through quite an established model now. It's the UK Design Council Double Diamond model. I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but all of our projects take this approach where effectively we go out and discover real needs on the ground. We then define what the key insights are before we then start developing ideas and coming up with installations and interventions, and then finally obviously delivering those. So that's the model that we take through. I'm going to talk about some of these projects in a kind of framing them, not just frame, I suppose, because when we go into these projects, we're often going into them in terms of regeneration or redevelopment or things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit through 4 project examples that hopefully give a sort of idea of how we approach kind of cultural programming in non-traditional cultural spaces. So this is not just riverfront regeneration. This is a project that we're doing with the Public Health Agency in Northern Ireland in Derry, Londonderry, so a city in the northwest of Northern Ireland. And it's really reimagining 6 miles, about 10 kilometers of riverfront in the city. And the river has historically divided the city. It's very divided past and history. And sadly, the river has become synonymous with mental health issues and suicide. So the way we've been doing that is going through this process, and we've been trying to understand what's the narrative that we can draw out that starts to build a more positive perception of that riverfront. So we've gone out and done community engagement, we've done pop-ups, we created an installation here, an art installation that we toured around that was based on a local tale of a whale that swam up the river. And really the idea here was to come up with a range of co-designed interventions that we could then start to culturally program throughout the city. So one of those interventions was the Foyle Reeds. This is the Foyle Bridge. It's 800 meters across, and it's about 9 stories tall at its highest point. And sadly, it's a point that's synonymous with mental health issues and suicide in the city. Through all of that engagement that we did, what we realized was that there was we could try and change the perception of that space through what is proposed as the largest art installation in Northern Ireland that just happens to act as a suicide prevention barrier. So this is 10,000 aluminium lights. It's called the Foyle Reeds because it's based on the reeds that sit alongside the riverbanks that you can sort of see down here. And the idea being, sorry, these photos aren't particularly clear, but the idea being it's very interactive as you walk past it, but importantly, it can be programmed for city events. So you can program it for Halloween, for example, which is coming up and is a big celebration in the city, for Christmas, for anniversaries, birthdays, and you can start to program how that light then responds to the city and starts to really change the perception of that space as one of negativity to one of celebration and positivity. Of course, we also recognize that we can't put barriers up everywhere. So another project here that we looked at was Foyle Bubbles. And these are portable pop-up spaces that can be rented out for very cheap rent on the proviso that the occupiers of these spaces, which would be local businesses, community groups and artists, undergo mental health awareness training. So they can start to be a community response to vulnerability at the riverfront, not just a clinical response. So you might get your coffee, and then speak to someone who's trained in mental health awareness and mental health prevention. So it's not just a riverfront regeneration project, but it's a way to foster civic ownership and change perception of the place for improved well-being. The next one I'm going to talk about briefly is this is not just a banana. So this is actually looking at a building that we're working on in Northern Ireland. This is Portview Trade Centre. It's the largest flax spinning mill in the world when it was built in 1911. But over the years, as spinning and the mill has sort of gone into disrepair, it's now quite derelict on certain floors. We do have 40 tenants, creative tenants. We have artists, we have filmmakers, we have a brewery on site, but we also have lots of empty space, as you can see here. And this is the site that you can see from the ground. And what we've started to look at is how do we engage the local community and how do we engage tenants into opening up that space into a space where the community can really be involved through neighbourhood tourism, regeneration, and also bringing out local stories and local histories through that space. One of the areas that we're working in is that only 8% of school children from this area go on to any kind of university education. So we're starting to look at what happens to those other 92% and how can we better train them for skills in the area. One of the stories that came up through our engagement piece and through our engagement work was this story of bananas in Belfast, believe it or not. So the head gardener of this site was the first man in the UK to try and grow bananas in the UK, in Belfast, where, as you can imagine, it rains and it's very cold, but he managed to grow bananas. And then, interestingly, during the 1930s, when there were mill strikes, workers' strikes around the rights of workers, the only song that the Protestants and the Catholics could agree to sing to march together was this song, "Yes, We Have No Bananas" by Louis Prima. So we thought, what a wonderful story to bring in into this mill space. And we've used that then with the national museums here in Northern Ireland and funded by the tourism board to open up a banana exhibition. So we're growing bananas in Belfast. This is, in fact, we opened up this week, our first opening. But we have this space as an event space, but also as a space to teach, to demonstrate, to run workshops that really tells a story about innovation and history in a heritage setting through growing bananas. And here you can see it as it's starting to grow and build in real life. But really importantly about that is what we're starting to develop is a living museum and the programming around that in this old heritage building. So we have the building, we're looking at the banana venue where we have a number of tenants who are local entrepreneurs. We have a cheesemaker and a mushroom grower who are all on site and growing and showing and demonstrating and working. And then we also have a series of programs and programmed events, as well as community takeovers in terms of gallery space. So we're looking at queer heritage within the building, we're looking at immersive audio experiences, and we're looking at maker spaces and things like that, all through the history of what's happened on that site, but told through the story of innovation in Belfast through a living museum of bananas. So it's not just a banana, but it's a community living museum in the middle of a heritage and community setting, and really starts to bring in that community in this area of East Belfast, which is relatively deprived, into that conversation about things to do in the area. Final two I'll talk about, this is not just a street light, and again, this is where we're trying to take programming and cultural content actually out onto the streets, particularly in Belfast. So we worked with the municipality and with Belfast on their new lighting strategy, a luminous city, and how can we go about lighting the streets differently. What we didn't want to do was create lighting that doesn't really respond to people or place. So lighting that is off the shelf, bought, and doesn't say anything about Belfast or the people of Belfast. And we wanted to open up some of the city's forgotten spaces and some of those places that are abandoned, derelict, or not particularly well used. So again, we went through this process where we engaged young people to understand actually what does lighting mean for them, what could it mean, and what could it be for the city. And we engaged local artists in understanding how could we translate some of those stories. This was a local artist where we produced a fly on the wall, which was all about what belonging means in Belfast, where these children told the stories of what belonging in Belfast means to them. And then we translated that into a life-size fly on the wall, which was a completely programmable street light. So it acts as a street light, but you can program the audio content and the visual content as it projects down. And so you have a co-designed art installation that also acts as a fully functioning street light for the city. That led to a range of design principles for the city of Belfast that they could use then to design lighting going forward for the future of the city. And that led to then a range of co-designed pilot interventions that have been created with the people of the city, with local artists, and importantly, that can be programmed to city events. So all of these lights, these in fact are printed on the 3D printers that are sitting behind me. They all tell a story of a particular space that they are in within Belfast. They've all been co-designed locally with local artists and local community, and they can all be programmed with different content and different audio and lighting content depending on the city. So for example, we've just put in different variation of content based on Halloween, which is coming up next week. So you can start to see how it responds to the city as a place. So it's not just a street light, but it's a way to promote visual art and new experiences and open up parts of our city to new audiences. And we think that's really important for programming and for improving well-being in the city. Final example, this is not just art in schools, and this is a project that we work with Rarita and the Cluj Cultural Centre on at the UB school in Romania, which I'm sure I'm saying wrong. But again, here what we wanted to do was really engage everyone within the school, children, teachers, and school stakeholders in the creation of physical spaces that would improve well-being, and then look at how we might be able to translate that to other contexts and other places around Romania. So we went through the same process. We did a lot of engagement. This was obviously during a time of kind of lockdown and things like that. So we did a lot of online engagement, but we also sent out activity packs to the kids. We engaged with the teachers and worked closely with them on audio tours and video tours of the school and lots of workshops, as well as a key stakeholder group that was full of artists, architects, psychologists, school teachers, school stakeholders, and the rest of it. And we started to break down wellbeing principles into 4 really simple categories. So we identified a space within the school that we could work in, and then 4 design principles that we could work towards around what children told us almost what they like to do within schools. So getting bored, creating and collaborating, exploring, and then almost getting in trouble and having a bit of that kind of safe risk within schools. That led us to a whole range of different ideas, but the one that eventually got taken forward was this idea that we could convert a storage room effectively into a mysterious planet room that could then be used by teachers and the children as a breakout space, as an alternative learning environment, as a space to reflect and also engage children who might not be actively engaged within a classroom environment, and really start to help some of that. I can't give you the fully finished pictures because we're nearly there.
Because time is running.
There you go. Here's a sneak peek of what it looked like. So it's not just art in schools, but it's a way to improve well-being through diversifying learning, programming, and creation of new spaces. And that's me. Thank you.
Jack, thank you so much. I'm just such a bad timekeeper.
Sorry.
Because I needed to listen to all this, and it took 12.5 minutes. So no follow-up question for you. You will be back in the discussions later on. I thank you very much. From arts to bananas to cultural heritage sites, urban scale interventions, does it all. It was very interesting, I think, and I was wondering, who are your you are in a way a service provider, and your clients could be any city all over Europe. But I was wondering how this European diversity, working in Belfast and in Cluj and so forth, is taken into consideration when it comes to your work, because Europe is so different and diverse, and I think needs and necessities in different cities and different environments are so different. And it's interesting that we have examples here from Belgium, from Slovenia, from the UK, East, North, South, West, in a way, and now from Greece. And we treat it as if we are all in a homogeneous space. At the same time, we all know, of course, that we are not, and that every city is different and so forth. So I hope that we can come back to this diversity in Europe with interventions such as yours. And I think you have an expertise on that as well. And the imbalances as well, maybe that you see from the point of view of urban space interventions in different parts of Europe, how this is something that you tackle in your work, or that you have to take keep in consideration when you do your work all across Europe. Thanks a lot. This gives me the chance to introduce the last speaker, Angeliki Lampiri from, sometimes, I mean, the city's name is changing all the time. Eleusis 2023, European Capital of Culture. And I think it's very interesting now to hear from the perspective of an ECOC programmer, somebody shaping these programs, but of course also somebody who is working on a public level with a city, responsible for policies, not just for a program, but a city is responsible for something that goes far beyond an ECOC year and a program that is shaped for the ECOC year. How you deal through the programming of an ECOC year with the topic of well-being on a structural, probably also structural level, way beyond 2023. Angeliki, your floor is yours.
Hello. I hope that you can hear me. Thank you for the introduction, Kathrin. I will try to share my screen somehow. Now you can see it.
Perfect.
Great. So,
and even on full screen. Yes.
Yeah, great. So yeah, the name of the city is Eleusis. It's the modern, let's say, name, and the ancient name is Eleusis. So that's why there is a little misunderstanding, but I would like to start from the beginning, from the introduction of the city, because our programming is very, very connected with the city itself. So Elefsina it's a small city of 30,000 inhabitants, and it's totally different from these stereotypical image that everybody has about Greece with sun and beaches and laying out to great beaches. It's one of the 5 most important sacred cities of the antiquity, the city of Eleusinian mysteries, and the birthplace of the tragedian of Aeschylus. It's thanks to its natural ports and strategic location. It's 21 kilometers away from the capital, from Athens. It was transformed for the 19th century and onwards to a productive engine of Greece and one of its largest industrial centers. So the signs of industrialization are prominent on the body of the city and affecting it, and often building this perception of a dark place, industrial place, polluted place that, let's say that it's not the first example in Greece that comes in mind as the city of the best quality of life, etc. So through our program, we are seeking to unveil the invisible side of Elefsina, marking a new era for the city and its transition to a new model of development, focusing on its dynamic cultural assets, and through these, let's say, our motto, mysteries of transition. In order to promote this transition, our goal is to explore and promote the potential of the arts and cultural experience, and to enhance in that way the individual, but also the community well-being. So how we are trying to do this? First of all, we are trying to create ways, improve ways and methods of access to culture for communities, usually staying aside, and thus offering a step for further integration in the society itself. So we are trying to promote social resilience and to enhance social inclusion through culture, and in particular for people with disabilities, people belonging to minorities, and also people belonging to socially in general marginalized groups, as well as to create this intercultural dialogue. So in this image, you can see a picture of a performance that we did. It was actually the first performance after the lockdown that we were able to do. It's the Free by Sis, so it's a text that is well known in Greece. It's talk about freedom, and the theatrical director Eleusis has worked with 55 citizens of Elefsina in order to create this work. So the citizens also put their perception of what freedom is for them. What I wanted to add is that through the feedback that we have from this group of people that actually still now communicate to each other, have a Facebook group all together, is that it was a healing process for them. It was, and also after this pandemic lockdown, for them, it was like a period of and time to have this dialogue between them that I missed a lot. So after the performance finished, we were asking, okay, and what now? What we will do? We will not meet each other again and be part of this performance. So we had a very, very good feedback for them, and a thirst of continuing. We are also trying to introduce scientific and artistic initiatives, actions, activities that stimulate cultural and social awareness about environmental issues and values that are totally connected with the and affect the quality of life in a regional level. So yeah, this is a picture of the cement factory. that is not producing right now, but it's still working, and it's part of the society, part of the community. So what we are trying to do is to establish a legacy project, the Eco-Culture Festival, that it's connecting art, well-being, and environmental issues, create a dialogue through artworks, through meetings, workshops, etc. So we are trying to create this project as well. Another goal is to establish and revitalize infrastructure that can facilitate and improve the quality of daily life for the people of the city, and contribute in developing and enhancing existing structures that interfere in the contemporary face of the city. So what you see in this picture is a building that is made by cupboards, but by a group of citizens. So it's the actual size of the building. Kronos, that it's an abandoned factory that it's in danger right now. So in this way, with a French artist, Olivier Grostret, we tried to highlight the importance of this building together and advocate for this building together with the citizens of Eleusis. We are also trying through different kind of projects to expand the use of public space in, as you can see here, unexpected places with different kind of ways. So this is our part of our documentary festival, that we tried to have screenings in places that usually people are not going. So, for example, this is a place that it's a dark area of the city, totally abandoned. It's actually a cemetery of shipwrecks. So it's a cemetery of boats that exist in the city. And so in order to highlight these spaces that usually are not used by the citizens, we are trying to have this kind of interventions, like the screening. And in the back, you also can see the refineries that are situated in Eleusis as well. Another aspect that we are really, and strand that we are working on, is to give time and space to artists to somehow become local. So to give to have these long-term projects that are together with the community itself, to share their stories in different ways. So this is a part of the performative work that we have done in a little neighborhood, Synikismos, together with a local association and a theater director, a Greek theater director, Yolanda Markopoulou, that worked for several months with this community. And we are involving this procedure with her. But we are trying to create this connection with artists and the community in different ways, because actually, especially with the economic crisis that we have in Greece, and also the crisis that the pandemic came, I believe that it's also our responsibility, and also in a local and regional level as well, to create the perfect circumstances for the artists, and to contribute on what are the economic, social, professional, and mental challenges that the artists are facing today. So in order to do that, we have different kind of workshops or meetings, international meetings, that we are trying to highlight these kind of questions for the cultural field. And last but not least,
yes,
I will be shorter. We are trying to, in terms of policy, we are trying to address the gaps and highlight the gaps and challenges that cities like Eleusis, so peripheral cities, are facing, such as limited opportunities for cultural participation, social inclusion, post-industrial development, the capacity that these cities have. And our goal is to be ready for 2023. And for the delivery of our social, let's say, transitional cultural program, and to engage more and more local communities in a meaningful and cultural and civic participation. That I believe that it's the key, let's say, phrase for a better quality of life and the well-being of the community itself, but also for the cultural field. So
thank you so much. Thank you, in red. I have one very, very quick follow-up question, and then we have 20 minutes left for our discussion. If you would mention only one, but really one element of when it comes to impact, results, legacies of all the interventions and the program that you are doing, maybe on the level of policy or on the level of the program of LFCNA 2023, and we look to 2024, what is this one impact or the one result that you want to keep for the lifespan after the European Capital of Culture when it comes to arts and well-being, or the well-being and the efforts that you are putting into this trend in your program now?
Oh, difficult question. Only one. I believe that for us, we are working a lot on changing this perception that the rest of Greece has for the community. So to make the citizens of Elefsina to be proud of their city after 2023.
Okay, so it's about ownership of their own city and making it their own. Well, let's all be there 2023. Thank you so much. Yes, thanks everyone on the panel who shared experiences. It's now up for a 20 minutes discussion. As I said at the beginning of our session, this is amongst panelists, but it's also with you and for you and with you. You meaning the audience listening to us here sitting with cameras on. So if you feel the urge to interfere, to intervene, to propose an idea, to bring up a concern that we are not voicing or that you are inspired by through these presentations, please raise your hand, and our technical support team in the back office is going to make sure that you can put on your camera and that you can contribute to the discussion. If not, you can also still use the Q&A option in your thing. It hasn't been used so far as I can see it, in order to leave any comments or questions. Otherwise, I'm going to continue putting questions to our panelists, and we can open the floor now. I invite you all in the next 20 minutes also, dears, to put questions to each other. It's not just me steering this boat to the end of the session, but it's all of us together. I announced this at the beginning. I want to start with a question regarding Jure's question about activism and the relation between arts and activism, because the session is called Programming Art for Wellbeing. Programming means that we are programmers and we present arts. What does it mean in terms of creating art for well-being? Are we asking artists to create arts for well-being, or are we still following the footprints of the artists, and we as presenters, we are offering them a framework to present their work? Are we following policies even sometimes that are obliging us to work on environments and other things and are not in close touch with what artists are proposing? Or are we excluding those that are not working on environmental or well-being issues from programmation? I'm not provoking a discussion. I just want to hear your thoughts about that, those issues. You are in touch with many, many artists in the BOZAR, in all your spaces. What is the tendencies from artists themselves? Are they more socially engaged than artists, let's say 10, 20 years ago? Is that changing in itself? Anne, can I start with you? And then we just take a quick round of 2 minutes, 1-2 minutes each, and then Jure, because you raised the topic, you conclude.
I think it's a very interesting question. Also relating to something that Jure said, that we have to be very careful to not use art as an illustration. And so we are working around a certain narrative or around a certain topic, and you sort of instrumentalize artists because they fit your framework. I think we have to be very careful about that. So I think we as an institution try more to follow the artists and to follow the footsteps of the artists, and not to force them to work in a certain direction, of course. I think it's a very difficult question to say whether artists are more engaged now. A lot of artists are working on, of course, very current topics like environmental issues and mental health issues. But as Jure said, it's fine if people don't. And we also see artists that don't do that. I remember that we had a little bit before the pandemic, we had this show with Nick Cave. And Nick Cave, he does the show where he engages with people and he talks to people and they can ask him questions. And our director asked him, do you feel that art should be political and should have an impact? And he said, no. And our director was actually shocked to this reply, but it's the right of the artist to say, my art, I only want to engage with people and I do not want to have an impact on the policy. So I think we have to be wary of the autonomy of the arts. Yeah. But maybe that's a naive answer.
No. I personally think also that arts can be very disruptive. It can be very painful in a way, but does that mean that it's not contributing to well-being? Because I think well-being has something to do with differentiation, with critical thinking. And this is not per se harmony. It's not per se good. It's
Exactly.
not all the kind of moral, ethical issues that we are bringing into the game. It can be very disruptive.
Exactly.
Jack, are artists your clients as well when you speak about urban interventions?
Yeah, I mean, we work obviously quite closely with artists in how we translate. I suppose the angle we come at it from is to work with the challenge in the first place. So whether that's how do we light up our streets, or whether that's how do we transform a space, and then we highlight an insight or an opportunity area where we think, okay, actually there's an opportunity here to improve well-being somehow, or to improve this space somehow, and improve the impact that will have on people's lives who live there, work there, play there. And so that's where we work with artists, I suppose, more in kind of setting the parameters of saying, this is where we wanted to go. But absolutely agree with what Anne's saying, in the sense that it's within the artist's right to create how they how they want to create, and have whatever the meaning of their work that needs to be, if you like. So I absolutely agree with Anne. In terms of artists as clients, we do work, and we're working quite heavily with with some sort of fairly big artists now, in how we translate their work into real life, if you like. And that's quite interesting in how you translate often ideas on a page into kind of real works, particularly from a kind of public placemaking perspective, where they're not necessarily temporary exhibitions or things like that. And that's quite an interesting process. But again, we like to work really closely with stakeholders and the artist to ensure that original artistic intent is followed throughout, so that we're not diluting it in any way.
And would you be an intermediator, or would you be co-creator of that artistic product somehow? How would you define yourself?
It's difficult, and it does change. I mean, in some elements we're the intermediary. Quite often, we talk quite a lot about co-design, and where we'll come in at a very early stage to work with stakeholders and the community and whoever it might be, to actually understand what the challenges are, and then bring artists in at that stage to say, okay, we think the brief, or this is the brief, these are the insights that actually we want to hit, that also help to hit on a policy level, whether it's around connectivity, or whether it's around playfulness, or whether it's around climate and green and things like that. So there is quite an element of co-creation, I suppose, but certainly at the same time, not, we try very carefully not to step on the toes of artists, and dictate what the final intervention should be.
Angeliki, you are working for such a long time with artists. Do you feel that artists are more and more socially engaged, dealing with topics such as well-being, in your perspective?
Yes, I believe so, that there is this tendency, but also there is this tendency of more social inclusion works. So the artists themselves have the need to be part of the community and work together with it. And sometimes they don't know how, and that's why I believe that the role of the municipalities it's very important. But on the other hand, it's good to give them the time, and the space, and also the budget to experiment on this field. And even if something goes wrong, to experiment different kind of methodologies and how they want to work. So not to intervene to the work, but to let them even fail or test different kind of tools, different kind of methodologies that they want to.
Yeah, I was intrigued, Jure, by your question or by your comment, because it's really also this, there is a topic of art and well-being. Then there is a curator or a programmer that puts this into a certain context, and then there's an artist who creates. Under this topic of, are you coming with a topic and then the artist follows? Is the artist proposing and then you follow? How do you do it? And do you have, well, some further elaborations on your own comments?
Well, I would say that, can you hear me? Yes. That artist is often abstract, it's complex, it's not straightforward. And I think what we're doing is raising an audience that can develop skills to read this artist language or artistic knowledge. And without programming, I think we are also raising through example rather than through instruction. So I think we are sending out signals and people can pick up on that rather than you being told this is what, and I think this is very important when it comes to these questions. I think just as an example from what we've done, like as I'm meaning raising as an example, is like this drag queen show, right? You know, it's something not quite easy to organize, it's very simple, but then I got feedback from like the queer community of Maribor, like, oh, you know, we've been, you know, it's about visibility. Like, it's so brave what you've done. And it's like, it's very important and it doesn't need to be told in a way, you know, it is, and it's a fun thing, you know, it was an entertainment evening after a serious discussion. So I think it's this what I'm proposing. It's, you know, like not being overly instructive. I think that's important.
If any one of you has a burning question, comment, or anything you would like to ask to others, please do so. Raise your hand and I give you the floor. Otherwise, I would just go on with one more burning question that I already also introduced, which has to do with the diversity in Europe and the different local specificities, of course, that you are representing right now. With IFA, the European Festivals Association, we are part of a project commissioned by the European Commission, which is called Perform Europe. And in Perform Europe, we are looking at the imbalances or imbalances when it comes to the performing arts touring. In this case, it's just about performing arts. And we, in the first phase of this project, Perform Europe, we have identified what we all know, huge imbalances when it comes to the accessibility of funding, accessibility of diversity between, in particular, East and West. The Balkan countries are not traveling to the West, but the West, Bombay's productions, well, not Bombay's, is moving to the East and so forth. So there's all these kind of findings and gaps when it comes to touring of arts productions. And we also find out that things like sustainability, environmental, human, cultural, economic sustainability, and questions of well-being are much lower rated in countries where the accessibility to funding is much, much lower. So it is almost seeming like luxury to think about arts and well-being because primary needs of the arts production are not met. So is it like that? Then when we speak about arts and well-being, it's still a kind of luxury topic. It doesn't seem so because we are all here in a diverse environment and everybody identifies this as a priority. But of course, you are speaking on your own behalf and you are speaking of your own context. You also know a broader national, local, national, European context, and you speak to colleagues. What is your feeling about this a different approach to the topic of arts and well-being in different environments, countries, regions. I mean, it can be geographical, but it could be also other parameters that you could mention. And I can address you all four because you're all working internationally and you have all experience in working internationally. Angeliki, maybe I start with you because you have such international bagage, know at least of all the others. I don't know exactly, but I assume that. Angeliki.
Yeah, I mean, it's true because I saw this survey. We are also part of Perform Europe, and we are part of Perform Europe because we found a gap also regarding on what we are doing in this kind of terms and criteria, and that's why we joined very, very enthusiastically to this. And it's true also that we have realized that usually in the eastern part, we look towards the western part of Europe, but usually we don't know each other in the Balkan region, and we are not communicating a lot. So what we are trying to do also is to create this kind of networks and create this kind of collaboration between Balkan countries, but also with the Mediterranean and the MENA region as well. So, for example, we are working with the Festival Academy, and we have hosted the Atelier for Art and Production Managers. And our goal was that the participants are coming of this area because usually we don't talk to each other a lot. Yeah, probably in this part of Europe, talking about art and well-being is a luxury because you have to deal with hardest issues. But I believe that well-being is a parameter in every different kind of levels of our life. So if you don't, as an artist, talk that you are working for well-being, probably it's a lie because well-being is including in what we are doing in every moment of our life. So yeah.
Thanks. Anne, what is your take? And we have 6 minutes left. I'm aware of that. So just a brief reply, and then we have a very quick.
I'll be very short. I think I agree with Angeliki that we also find that we feel we are maybe a little bit behind with regards to countries like the UK or Canada, who have done a lot of work on arts and well-being. But then, of course, if you are with other countries that we are working with, for example, Turkey, etc., if you are working with lower funding, you have different issues. And then you have other pressing issues than putting this a priority within your work. But I think that now with the pandemic, it has become such a pressing topic, this issue of health, that nobody can deny it anymore. And that's why we feel that a lot of institutions, whether you have the funding or not, are at least starting a reflection on it and starting to think about it. So we feel, as well as the environment, that it's becoming quite a topic we cannot avoid anymore in no matter what situation we are in.
Yeah, and it's very clear from all research, I'm sure, that all the elements we are talking about are very complex and interlinked, and one affects the other. That is probably
exactly.
Jack and Jure, who's taking it first?
I can jump in actually on that interlinked point, because it was exactly what was going through my head. Is a lot of the projects that we end up working on, I suppose it is that exact piece, that kind of siloed thinking piece, particularly when we're working in in a public space. We're dealing often with the Department for Health, Department for Infrastructure, local municipality, the environmental agenda, the cultural strategy, and all of these different and disparate silos, if you like, that come together to make a city or a place. And what we've started to see, and what we're trying to do, is kind of turn that tide, if you like, that some of these particularly artistic-led and cultural interventions have very cross-cutting themes that go across all of those different silos. But it can be quite hard. We've found it difficult in some of the projects that we've done to get all of those people, all the directors around a room and actually take ownership of it, because they want to put it in a particular silo. Oh, that's a health project, or that's an infrastructure project, or that's a tourism project, when actually it's all of those things, and it cuts across all of them. So we're starting to get there, and I think, as Anne says, maybe the UK is slightly more advanced in some of the international work that we're doing. We know that it's hard; it can be harder in other places, but I think it's only hopefully going to get better, and we've seen improvement definitely. And I think one of the things that we're keen to do is making sure that we measure the output, and that's a difficult question and topic in itself. But how do you measure cultural impact, improvement in well-being, all of these things that you can then pass back to those silos across health and infrastructure and all the rest of it, and say, actually, we made an impact on your key objectives. And that's something that we're working on, but probably is a whole topic in itself, whole conference in itself.
But that's interesting, and gives partly a reply to Anne's question, how to measure the impact. And somebody told me there is no such a reply as how to measure impact as a methodology, but rather you have goals, and that is how you measure your impact, if you met your goals or not. So your impact measurement depends very much on the way how you set your own objectives and goals, I guess.
True.
I think we're increasingly experiencing kind of feeling expectations from the government bodies, from European bodies, and also from ourselves to address these topics of diversity and well-being. And I think European projects, such as one that we are here gathered under, provide this kind of answers, but it's a double-edged sword. At once it provides kind of staffing, know-how, networks, funding. But at the other side, we are talking among friends, involved in many European projects, that it's kind of like exhausting, that sometimes you're feeling like you're producing content just to have somewhere to stick the EU logo on, So we need to still, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe with this COVID situation, it has kind of brought all of this up, and we can address it also.
Wow, yes, thanks. I wanted to give you one more time the floor, but those words somehow for me sum it up so well, that we are in a continual construction exercise, and it's an ongoing attention that we need to put on the things that we are doing, and avoid just to put logos on what we do. But such European projects as this one, I think, and I wanted to congratulate all the partners involved for this project, I think are so important to be discussed, not just inside these walls, but to have forums such as this forum, this Art and Wellbeing Forum, to expand knowledge accessibility of these experiences with others from within the sector, but also indeed with policymakers at the very end, not to run that risk to have work with logos and not with contents or with legacies that somehow I guess we want to leave. If you, dear friends, the four of you agree, I will conclude this session. Unless you have a burning last comment, raise your hand. You don't. With thanking you for your generosity of sharing this. I always love to conclude panels 1 minute before because it gives 1 minute more time for something else. If I now stop talking, I will even manage, but I might not, because I have to announce the next session as well. I thought it was a very rich discussion from really inside the teams that we are working with, the burnout personal level of situations to the structural levels of policies, of cities engagement, of the capacities and skills and roles that we can all take as organizers, as presenters, as city representatives. So I thought that was a very strong and very diverse program and a set of experiences we could listen to. And I said that I would conclude at 13:30, just in time now, sorry, with announcing the next panel, which is in 90 minutes time. There is a break now of 90 minutes. At 3 o'clock Central European time, there is the next panel on cultural interventions for health. I think very interesting, and it probably leads very well further our discussions that we have started and continued here today. Thank you very much to the Cultural Centre Cluj and to all partners involved. And I wish you a good afternoon and hope to see you live somewhere, somehow, soon. Stay well.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.